the last Hellenes of Central Asia? There are several possible answers, but from the outset, we put aside the notion of ethnos, which does not appear to be relevant for the milieus we are concerned with. They were all mixed from the beginning. If we look for a political answer, then it varies considerably from one region to the other. Greek domination, or at least rulers posing as Greek by their names and portrait style, end up in Bactria in about 130 BC with the downfall of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. But they continue on the Indian side with those called Indo-Greeks by numismatists. The Indo-Greeks last until 70 BC in the Kabul region, and a bit later in Gandhara, the Peshawar region, now in Pakistan, where the very last vanished in eastern Punjab in the beginning of our era. More pertinent, perhaps, in the linguistic criterion. There are epigraphical indications of Hellenophones in Bactria until the 2nd century AD. The last testimonies of the official use of Greek date from the first year of the Kushan king Kanishka in 127. Here, the very last Greek inscription from Central Asia, the signature of Dia Palamedou in the temple of Surkotal, and a coin legend of Kanishka still in Greek, but the year after, he changed it to the Bactrian language. There is also the indirect evidence for long-lasting Greek-speaking merchant communities on the Indian West Coast. Indeed, today, we shall seek Hellenism in still another direction, namely the enduring attachment to the literary heritage of Greece. In this case, one can speak of Philhellenism in the same way as some Parthian rulers called themselves Philhellenes. And in this respect, the answer proposed by recent research is extremely paradoxical. The time when subjects which are properly Greek are displayed most abundantly and most faithfully on silverware, the most prestigious artistic medium, is neither the Greek period, nor even the Kushan period, but the so-called Dark Ages of the 4th to 7th centuries under the rule of the Kidarite Huns and Hephtalite Huns, whose reputation for ferocity was in no way inferior to their cousin Attila. Look at the way they choose to show their faces on coins. We would search in vain for any reminiscence of the classical beauty canon. But at the same time they were putting these faces on their coins, their aristocracies were commissioning these plates. At this stage, it is proper to give a brief chronological and geopolitical reminder of post-Greek periods in Central Asia. At about the same time, at the reign of Augustus, the former heritage of the Indo-Greeks came into the hands of the Indo-Scythians and Indo-Parthians. These small kingdoms, loosely affiliated to Parthian Iran, controlled the coastline on both sides of the Indus and played a major role to keep up commercial and cultural contacts with the Mediterranean. At the same time, the Kushan Empire was taking shape more to the north, initially in Bactria. The great king Kanishka, conqueror of India, who sent an embassy to Hadrian in northern Syria when he came to power in 127, claims in his monumental inscriptions to have rejected the Greek language in order to impose the Aryan language, in this case, Bactrian. This, in fact, happened also on the coinage, where Greek legends were replaced by legends in Bactrian, an Iranian language written with the Greek alphabet. In India, however, Middle Indian remained in official use. In reality, Kushan art remained deeply impregnated with Greek traditions in both its dynastic and Buddhist versions. In the 3rd century AD, the western part of the Kushan Empire was conquered by the new Sasanian dynasty from Iran. But soon afterwards, new waves of invaders surged from the steppes. They called themselves Huns, like the Huns of Europe, to whom they were probably related. Two Hunnish empires succeeded each other for 2 centuries, the Kidarites, then the Hephthalites. For the first time since the Greeks, they reconstituted a domination which extended from Samarkand to northwest India. For the first time also, empires based in Central Asia represented a serious threat to Iran, then in the hands of the Sasanian dynasty. All along the 7 centuries, marked by so many political disruptions, the demand of local aristocracies, whatever their origin, for luxury objects produced in the West never ceased. For the Indo-Parthian period, we have the remarkable testimony of the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a vademecum composed by a Greek merchant at Alexandria. I quote, "At Barigaza, for the king," Barigaza is here, it's now Broach in the south of Gujarat. At Barigaza, for the king, they were importing precious silver vases, important for us, musical instruments and slaves, good-looking girls to serve as his concubines, excellent wine, simple but sumptuous clothes, extraordinary perfume. The right moment to leave Egypt for those selling to this emporium is the month of July, that is Epiph. At the same time, in the steppe and mountain belt more to the north, the Silk Road was taking shape, a term which is somehow misleading, as silk never represented the main commodity, and moreover, was primarily a Chinese diplomatic tool, whose appropriation as a commercial good came later. In that, and in many other respects, the Sogdian traders from Samarkand and Bukhara played the main part. During the period when they had fallen over under the control of the Hunnish empires, they managed to establish a string of merchant colonies from Crimea and sometimes Byzantium to the Chinese capital. Among the precious goods they traded were silver vessels of various origins, many of which carry ownership inscriptions in the Sogdian and Bactrian languages. Today, we shall concentrate mainly on the series known as Bactrian bowls, according to what was probably their main place of manufactures. The notion of Bactrian bowls was introduced in the scientific literature by Kurt Weizmann in 1943, who published 3 of them in a resounding article. For the first time, Weizmann managed to detect depictions from Greek tragedies, but he was on the wrong track in 3 respects. He attributed everything to Euripides. He considered each bowl as a patchwork from several tragedies, and he dated the series from the Greek or immediately post-Greek period. In 1986, Boris Marchak from the Hermitage first produced new specimens and demonstrated that the series dated from the time of the Hunnish empires, a solution which has never been questioned since. But he refrained from a reinterpretation of the subjects. Recently, the corpus has expanded to more than 20 specimens due to the boom in the antique trade fed by illegal excavations in Afghanistan and Pakistan. At least the main owners, the Miho Museum in Japan and the Al-Sabah collection in Kuwait, have published catalogues written by specialists. There are also catalogues of temporary exhibitions. These bowls are small vessels, about 20 centimeters wide and 6 centimeters high. Their ultimate source of inspiration both for the shape and for the literary subject matter, are the so-called Megarian bowls, of which only ceramic versions have survived. The Bactrian silver bowls, however, executed according to the Sasanian technique of the single shell, with added motifs incrusted and finished by hammering and chiseling. Partial gilding survives on some specimens and presumably existed on all. Three categories of models can be identified. Some vases, most probably, drew their inspiration from Greek models, either imported during the Greek period or produced at the court of the Greco-Bactrians. Some extraordinary specimens have recently surfaced in the Al-Sabah collection, although they are not always easy to distinguish from later Roman importations. The Dionysiac repertoire is predominant in this category of objects, as on these two ones from Al-Sabah. Dionysus paired with Ariane, I don't show the photo, and here Ariane. Another source of inspiration recently identified was the booty brought to Central Asia during the Sasanian campaigns against the Roman Empire, in which contingents from the former Kushan Empire participated. The most striking example is a plate which Anca and I have published. It shows the debate between the Greeks in front of Demeter's temple at Aulis on the eve of their embarkation to Troy. Achilles is furious at the impending sacrifice of Iphigenia, while Menelaus points to her future her further destiny as a priestess in Tauris. Agamemnon is sitting on the throne, and Ulysses is recognizable here by his pointed hat. This plate of outstanding artistic quality was executed in Italy during the 1st century BC. But in 265 AD, it was eventually dedicated in a temple in Bactria by its last owner, a satrap who inscribed his name. Our hypothesis is that this satrap had taken part in one of the victorious Sasanian campaigns against Rome and had brought the plate back from a temple, maybe in Syria, maybe in Anatolia. And now, Anca, please go on.
The third source was trade. This never dried up currently and eventually writes China. Maybe the best known example is the so-called Beitan cup, molded in silver and discovered in the Gansu province. While the rich wine scroll full of grapes and animals is frequent in the Roman imperial decoration of vases and architectural pieces, the association between Dionysos on a panther and the 12 gods, among whom Dionysos is himself, this association is quite exceptional. The cup has a Bactrian inscription, which suggests a Bactrian intermediary. The success of this Roman of the Roman vases in China is confirmed by their imitation, as one can see on these two bronze examples, gilded examples with reliefs, which were discovered in Datong and which are now in the Shaanxi Museum. We do not know the fabrication place, but the Bactrian intermediary must be taken into consideration, as we can prove while looking at another object discovered in Datong, this gold leaf, on which one can recognize an exceptional triumph of Heracles and Dionysos in a triumphal Roman chariot driven by two centauri. One records here the famous contest between Heracles and Dionysos, which is represented on very nice Roman golden vases, like the Patera in Rennes, from Rennes, which is conserved in the French National Library. But what is exceptional here is that both the hero and the god are together in the chariot. This association is specific for the time of Septimius Severus, so this must be the time of the Roman model, because this emperor spread the cult of the two tutelary gods of his native city, Leptis Magna. The two gods were Shadrapha, Liber Pater, so Bacchus, Dionysos, and Milkashtart, so Hercules, Heracles. Nevertheless, the representation of a beard Dionysos, as you can see here, sends us to northern India, in Gandhara, so northwest of the present-day Pakistan, or in Bactria, because it is there that we have continuously, since Hellenistic time, the representation, so the archaic representation, pre-Hellenistic representation of the beard Dionysos. And you can see here one of the Dionysos which were sold on the market and one can find on the internet. Our work on Bactrian silverware revealed a whole range of topics, literary as well as historical, which are perfectly known in Bactria and Sogdiana at the time when these recipients were made. We are showing here only some examples, starting with the Homeric themes, which are either inherited from Hellenistic models, we are judging this by iconography, or they are imported and adapted from Roman and sometimes even late Roman models, so in Sasanian time. Our first example is from the Freer collection of the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. And this is one of the Bactrian bowls that Kurt Weizmann tried to identify as a patchwork of Euripidean motifs. According to our new reading, the bowl corresponds to Bellerophon's myth, integrated in the Lycian royal genealogy of the sixth song of the sixth book of the Iliad. This genealogy is told by Glaucus, who discovers his ancestral hospitality links with Diomedes on the battlefield. Glaucus is a parent of Sarpedon, the Lycian king present himself also in Troy, and this Sarpedon has in the genealogy an ancestor who is also called Sarpedon, and one can see on the vase here as a baby. So, as always on the Bactrian vases, we are looking at the medallion, and this shows us the direction from where we have to start, and we are reading the motifs clockwise. So, in this case, the eight eagles, so Zeus, shows us points to Bellerophon, who is represented on Pegasus, and he is going to Lycia, as Homer tells us, Hobe Lycie. He's going there, and Iobates, the Lycian king, condemns him somehow and asks him to kill Chimera, because Chimera could not be killed by any other, not even by the most powerful and a little bit savage Lycian at the king's court. Here, the Chimera is represented as a bear, and this is a mark of the late antique model of the plate. We can find other mosaics in Northern Africa in late antiquity where the Chimera is a bear. Then we see Bellerophon together with the king here after he submitted the Solumni, people in Anatolia, as well as the Amazons. So we have the Amazon, the woman here, and the Solumi here, who is punished, who is killed by a servant of the king. What follows next on the other side is the abundance of food and wine of Bellerophon, because the king offered him his own daughter and gave him to the half of his kingly honor a fair tract of orchard and of plot land. And then we see Bellerophon, already old and blind, who is accompanied in a pious scene by Laodamea, the daughter he had with the Iobates' daughter. This Laodamea, because he behaved properly, piously with her father, is honored by Zeus, and she becomes a child from Zeus. This is Sarpedon at the origin of the genealogy. We go now to a second Homeric example. This time it is not a bowl, it is a plate, so the decoration is on the interior side. And we could recognize on this plate the wedding of Pasithea and Hypnos. What we can see here It's a structure which is common on this kind of plates since late Hellenistic times at the last. So it's a division between a main scene and a secondary scene in the etc. downstairs here. And in the main scene, we can see the day of preparation of the wedding. So we have 3 women, one of whom is the bride. She's on the throne, and she is prepared by 2 other companions. So the 3 graces with Pasitea in the middle, preparing for what will become when she goes downstairs in the night, the wedding night. Pasitea, according to Homer, Iliad 14, 233 and following, is marrying Hypnos, the god of sleep, as a gift given by Hera, the wife of Zeus, to the god of sleep, to Hypnos, because Hypnos helped Hera to conquer again, to seduce Zeus on the Mount Ida. What we can see on the back of this plate, there are Bactrian inscriptions proving that the owner of this vase, the Bactrian owner of this vase, who probably offered the vase to one of his wives for the wedding, not the name of the man is mentioned, not of the wife. So he was understanding that this is about the marriage scene. What is interesting also is there are the so-called Lagi Ptolemaic, or let's say Egyptianizing motifs. So what we have here, in fact, is a type of Aphrodite Isis, which is frequent in 1st century BC, 1st century CE. But this Greco-Roman, so to say, Egyptian motif, way of representing a beautiful woman, is somehow contaminated with the Indo-Iranian way of representing beauty. As you can see, the ladies are a little bit bigger than on the Greco-Roman motif. So in order to please this kind of people, here we are in the 3rd, 4th century CE, and we can compare this with a 5th century bowl from Samarkand, the Chiliek bowl, where we can really see the generous shapes of the woman. We are coming now to the last Homeric example chosen today, and this is a vase which is preserved now in the Ufa Museum in Russia, and which was found also in the steppe, because most of these objects are, of course, not in Bactria itself, but they were taken already in antiquity by the nomads and exchanged as gift of trade or military rapes to the steppes. And what we can see on this vase, there are 2 scenes inspired by the Odyssey. We are seeing Ulysses, Odysseus, in front of Polyphemus, and we are seeing also Ulysses in front of Circe. So the first scene from the book 9, from the song 9 of the Odyssey, it's interesting because it shows, in our opinion, that these people who made this vase were really knowing the Homeric text. What Homer tells us is that Polyphemus is living in a dark place, so in hollow caves, in speci plapyroisi. This is why we have a torch here. This is what Ulysses is having in his hand. And this type of torch, you can see here, can be assimilated. It's comparable with what we have on Sogdian ossuaries studied for so many decades by Frantz Grenet. So Ulysses is preparing the torch in order to blind Polyphemus, who promised to Ulysses a gift of hospitality. Ulysses brought some very good wine of Maronea, and Polyphemus says, I will give you a xenion. I will give you the gift one has to give to the foreigner coming to his house. What is this stranger gift? Is the body of the companions of Ulysses, who were devoured by Polyphemus. What is interesting is that this xenion from the Homeric text is represented on the Bashkiria vase as the Sogdian ossuary. So this cannot be an iconographic importation from the Greco-Roman world, because this kind of ossuary, you can see it, for example, in the hand of this goddess Spandarmat on a 7th century ossuary from Bijan Naiman. So it's really an understanding of the text in our opinion. On the other part of the Bashkiria vase, we can see again following very closely the Homeric text, Circe, who is a witch with a bowl and with a wand, which is carried by a child here. We'll speak immediately about it. We can see the loom, which is traditionally associated with Circe in the Greek iconography, as you can see already in this comic. In a drawing from the 5th, 4th century, we see a vase. And what is particular, but not impossible in the Roman time repertoire, text and iconography, is a child on the shoulder of Circe. We are seeing also on the vase the companions of Ulysses, who, just like in Roman representations, are already transformed in animals. So they are half animals, half people, and they recognize Ulysses who come to Circe. So we are in something parallel to what we have in Sperlonga or in other representation of Roman times. So the child must be Faunos, who was a child of Circe with Poseidon, the god of the sea, and who appears in Onos of Panipolis as one of the companions of Dionysos in India, and he was himself a wizard. Another category of texts which are represented on the vases are the pieces inspired from the tragedy, especially Attic tragedy. And here we are with Kustanai bowl representing the mythos of Oedipus. Again, we are looking at the medallion in order to find out which is the first scene, and we are going clockwise and we are discovering 4 scenes which follow the logic, not exactly the text, but the story behind the text of Sophocles, Oedipus, the king. But it, again, a very close representation confronting with the text. We are seeing here the baby Oedipus, which is abandoned on the Mount Citeron at the foot of a goddess who has the characteristics of the Demeter. So the Citeron mountain in Boeotia was dedicated to Demeter, Erunis, so a kind of Chthonian mother goddess. And this goddess is here represented in a Rajalilasana pose, so the pose, the royal pose of relaxation, Indian pose from the Gupta period. So this allows us to date very well the vase at the beginning of the 5th century AD. She has, of course, the cornucopia, and she makes a gesture, she makes a kind of mudra, meaning the beginning and also the blessing, and also, hello, guys, we start with me. Second scene, we can see Oedipus as a traveler meeting Laios without knowing that he was his father. And what we can see here with the foot, Oedipus is walking. So it's a car accident, in fact, as a crossroads when Oedipus was going to Delphi. And what is interesting, and this is the very precise peculiarity which exists in Sophocles' text and which is not attested in any other representation in the Greco-Roman, late Greek and Roman times of Oedipus, he has a traveler stick. He does not kill his father with a sword, as we can see in Hellenistic times on scenes inspired by Euripides. This is a stick, and it is really an accident. The servant cannot save Laios, and we can see her here, the wife of Laios making a libation on his tomb, sign for the viewer that the king is dead. Then what we can see here is unique in the iconography preserved about Oedipus is the marriage between the son and the mother. So the son is seducing the mother with a flower, and she, the mother, Iocasta, has a pose of a Hellenistic Aphrodite, as you can see, and Aphrodite, of course, so the beautiful Aphrodite or Psyche in the East with this representation of Taxila. And the giving of flower to a lady, it's something that this barbarian of Central Asia was doing. So I don't know many representation of offering flowers in the Greek and Roman, our civilized, so to say, world. But these guys, for example, on this Kushano-Sasanian plate, the guys who are offering flowers to their beloved ladies. And this is what Oedipus is doing with his mother. The last scene shows the servant who did not kill the baby and who did not want to tell about the truth of the identification, in the moment when the other servant who took Oedipus to Corinth is coming. So we are seeing here the revelation of the truth. So the servant is telling the truth, and Jocasta is getting suicide. The new king here, we can see it with his scepter, is taking care of her, and we have here Oedipus going back to the Citeron with another tree and talking with Mithras, with the sky, with Apollo. You have seen here, so a goodbye gesture showing that the person is dying, putting the hand on the shoulder, and we know very well this gesture from classical times and also Roman representation. So the one with the hand on the shoulder is the dead one, and it is a gesture which is common between the Greco-Roman and the Iranian world. What is interesting, so the proximity with the Sophocles text is also the fact that Oedipus appears here as the child of the fortune. And this here writes, I consider myself the child of fortune, of the generous fortune, and this is no shame, which was repeated in Greek and Roman rhetoric schools. So we can see in Plutarch, for example, that Sylla was using this, is represented on the vase, because this goddess of children in the Indo-Iranian representation is like a mother for Oedipus. Now, in the medallion, we have the servant and Jocasta. The servant is the one who did not kill the baby and the one who saw the murder of the father and who understood who Oedipus was. What is interesting in this vase is despite this, let's say, Hellenic appearance and the proximity with Sophocles text, the meaning is completely different. In the medallion, what we see is a Zoroastrian confrontation between the evil and the good. Jocasta represents the good. She has the open hand, which means, when we confront with other representation, the generosity. She accepts everything which is given to her. She is good, and she accepts even the lie of the servant who did not tell the truth about the child and the father. And the servant is here represented with one hand pointed to Jocasta, which means in Iranian gesture respect. So it's a servant talking to his master, and with the other hand is it's closed, and this means lie. And we have this opposition, so lie, truth of the Zoroastrians. We are going now to another theatrical example, maybe also related to Sophocles. It's more difficult here to say what text it's precisely representing, this Stroganov ball that you saw on the poster of the conference. What is interesting to see here is that we have the persons who are using this kind of vases. So we have the Hephthalites representing here, so a man and his kaftan, and a woman in a banquet, and the man is having the Bactrian bowl in his hand, and they are banqueting, they are drinking party. It's the same as a mythical drinking party, which one has to understand was taking place in front of them. So we are at the theatrical representation, let's say. What this theatrical representation is showing, so you can see here up is Heracles sitting as a banquet. He's banqueting with the centaur Pholos. You know that he was received by Pholos and who gave to Heracles very good wine. Other centaurs are coming, and the other party got too much excited, and some centaurs lost their lives. So we are seeing here. And after this bloody party, Heracles is going to kill the Erymantian boar that you see here already killed and brought to the Tyrant king Eurystheus. So we can see here, we can represent here something like what these Hephthalites were seeing from, we don't know in what language, of course, from the Greek theater. I told you, and with this is the last part of the presentation, we have also historiographic themes, and we are referring here to two representations of Alexander. The first is related to Alexander Romans in a Jewish representation. We have this ball, which was preserved in Tibet, in Lhasa, and which is now in Tokyo Ancient Museum, which represents like a Dionysian Pompeii, where 3 times we have Alexander the Great that we recognize after his coiffure, leonine hair, and of course we have the representations, including on small bronzes in the Lysipean tradition. We also have heads studied by Lorian Sev, which were used maybe as talisman, which were found in the last layers of Samarkand, casted in terracotta, and these heads could also send back to Alexander, the founder of the Nana temple of Samarkand, or also the kind of founder of Samarkand. So Alexander was a hero in Central Asia as he was in Alexandria, and he is represented here 3 times in 2 hypostases. The first is when he is drinking from the fountain of immortality in the land of Darnex, or of the blessed, and the second here is when he is taking around the incense from the trees in the forest around the oracle of the sun and of the moon. The 2 episodes, which are put face to face here, as you can see, are brought together only in the 5th century AD, CE, in the beta recension of the Alexander Romans. But this is not only beta recension, it's a Jewish interpretation of the beta recension, because the 3 figures of Alexander are very carefully circumcised. And we know from the Babylonian Talmud that, so also 5th, 6th century CE, that Alexander reached the fountain of immortality. So only the Jews greet Alexander with this honor to accede to the water of immortality. Only Sefer Toldot Alexandros Makdoni, which is a medieval text preserved in a 14th century manuscript, talks about the circumcision of Alexander before entering the Garden of Eden. But this model, either the same, either invented at different periods, is necessarily Jewish and related to something like a Jewish legend. However, in this representation of the Bactrian bowl, we have also the color, a local color. For example, the priest of the oracle of the sun on the moon has some like monkey features, which is not unusual, because he is a musician, and musicians on these bowls and in this Indo-Iranian Central Asiatic repertoire, as you can see, are monkeys. We have here on this vase also a testimony about the representation, so we don't speak about the Jewish iconoclasm anymore. In late antiquity, the Jews were using images, Hellenic images, and also we can see with here the influence, so between the Christian and the Zoroastrian invention of the paradise in a place which was really there where the late antique people put the terrestrial paradise from the 5th century CE. And the very last example we are mentioning today is another Stroganov bowl, again from the Hermitage, discovered in Vereno, where we propose to identify this time a historic event. It is a hunt. You can see on the bowl, so we have a rider with a spear, killing a beast which is twice the measure of the horse, so it is a tiger, and on the other side of the bowl we have 2 other riders killing with the bow 2 lions. So Alexander with the spear and 2 other riders. What is interesting to note is that 2 of the 3 characters have a diadem, a crown, so they are connotated of kings, but one of the other archers, of the 2 archers, has no crown. So we are interpreting this as the illustration of the Bazaira hunt near Samarkand, which took place in 328 BC, and which is related with some mixtures, with some imprecision by Quintus Curtius Rufus in his history of Alexander. So we have here Alexander killing the tiger, and Curtius Rufus is speaking about an unusually big lion, because there was not yet the word tiger in his sources, in his Hellenistic sources. And the other must be Lysimachus, who became king, and the other must be Crateros, who was not never a king. What is interesting is that the Huns of Alexander could enter the Central Asia not only through text, through traditions which were preserved, in this case we think there in the region of Samarkand since Hellenistic times, but also through other representation of Alexander Huns. And we are proposing here to interpret this Roman silver plate of the 3rd century CE as the other Crateros hunt in Syria, which took place in Syria, where Alexander, that you can see here, launched his spear and killed the lion. The lion is represented twice in a Sasanian fashion. So first he is attacking and then he is killed by the spear of Alexander. And we have here someone, so probably Crateros, who is ready to help Alexander. When Alexander, you can see here, he is at the ground, so he is in a big danger. And we have other 2 diadocs here. What is interesting about this plate, this Roman plate, is that it also had a Bactrian inscription. Conclusion. What we can say after this is that we have to reconsider the frontiers and the chronology and the impact of Hellenism. You know all about the theater of Iconum, excavated by Paul Bernard de France Grenet. You all know about the texts, which were the Greek texts, which were discovered in Iran on papyrus and parchment, published by Claude Rapin. You know about the Gandhara palettes, illustrating, like here, for example, scenes of Euripides. And you know about the text from rhetors like Plutarch saying that Alexander was a teacher of Asia and of the whole world, because Alexander taught the Persians, the Sassanians, the Gedrosians to interpret the tragedies of Euripides and Sophocles. With this basis, we see that these are not mere words, that there was a reality. Greek theater and Greek texts were known in the region, and until the end, until the Islamic conquest. And not only the text, but also, for example, here on this plaster medallion, we can see the circulation of motifs, and in this case, a motif representing Sophocles with the Muses, which was discovered in Egypt. So images and text continued to circulate. They were preserved there and continue to circulate through the Indian Ocean throughout antiquity. And my very last image is the fact that documents continue to appear, and this is a discovery which could confirm what it was always criticized, that, this is not reality, what Dioprusa is telling, that Homer's poetry is sung even by the Indians who translate it in their language and dialect. But what we have here, discovery for several days ago, put on the internet without transliteration. I just took it from Facebook, and we have from Uzundara fortress near Samarkand this shirt with ink and an inscription which can be read with Greek letters like Achlios, Achli, double lambda, Ios, Achlios. Thank you very much.